Picture Nigel Farage standing at a press conference announcing that Robert Jenrick has joined Reform UK after being spectacularly sacked by Kemi Badenoch, and then just casually, almost as an afterthought, dropping an absolute political bombshell. "Oh, and by the way," he says with that trademark smirk, "there will be a Labour defection next week. Not a Conservative backbencher having second thoughts, not another disgruntled Tory looking for a new home, but a Labour politician, someone from the governing party, someone he later described as well-known." And just like that, Westminster goes from political drama to absolute chaos. Farage has been hoovering up Conservatives like they're going out of fashion, but snatching a Labour MP, that's not just poaching, that's declaring open season on the entire political establishment. The floodgates aren't just open anymore, they've been blown off their hinges, and nobody knows who's jumping ship next. This is political carnage at its absolute finest, and we are here for every glorious second of it. Quick favor, if you are absolutely loving this chaos, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell icon right now. Over 94% of you haven't subscribed yet. It's completely free, takes 2 seconds, and helps us keep bringing you this spectacular political theatre. Cheers if you did. Right, let's tear this apart. So let's set the scene properly, because context matters. Nigel Farage held a press conference to announce that Robert Jenrick, former Shadow Justice Secretary and Conservative Party heavyweight, had officially joined Reform UK after being sacked by Kemi Badenoch. That alone would have been a massive story, the kind of thing that dominates news cycles for days. A senior Conservative figure, someone who ran for party leadership not that long ago, jumping ship to Reform after being booted out by his own party, that's political gold. But Farage, being Farage, couldn't just leave it there. He had to go and announce that he's been talking to multiple senior Conservative figures, and oh, by the way, some Labour ones as well, and there will be a Labour defection next week. That's not just stealing the spotlight, that's setting fire to the entire theatre whilst everyone's still watching. Now, Farage admitted, and this is quite interesting, that he's been talking to Robert Jenrick for some weeks, some months. This wasn't a sudden decision made in anger after being sacked. This was planned, discussed, negotiated over time. Jenrick didn't wake up this morning and decide on a whim to join Reform. This has been brewing for ages, which makes Kemi Badenoch's decision to sack him make a lot more sense, doesn't it? She said she had clear, irrefutable evidence that Jenrick was plotting in secret to defect in a way designed to be as damaging as possible to his shadow cabinet colleagues and the wider Conservative Party. She wasn't just firing someone for disloyalty, she was trying to get ahead of what she knew was coming, trying to control the narrative before Jenrick could defect on his own terms. It didn't really work, did it? Because now the story is both that she sacked him and that he's joined Reform, maximum drama on both ends. Badenoch posted on X, formerly Twitter, saying she removed the whip and suspended Jenrick's party membership with immediate effect. She said the British public are tired of political psychodrama, and so is she, that they saw too much of it in the last government, and they're seeing too much of it in this government, and she will not repeat those mistakes. That's quite rich when you think about it, isn't it? She's complaining about political drama whilst participating in some of the most dramatic political theatre we've seen in years. Sacking your former Shadow Justice Secretary and then immediately having him pop up at a Reform UK press conference isn't reducing drama, it's creating a prime-time television event. But let's talk about what Farage actually said about Labour, because this is where things get properly spicy. He announced there will be a Labour defection next week and that everyone will be invited to it. He's turning it into an event, a spectacle, a show. This isn't going to be a quiet announcement buried in a press release. This is going to be a full media circus with Farage at the centre playing ringmaster. And he specifically said the Labour figure would be well known.
Not some random backbencher nobody's heard of, not a councillor from a district you'd need a map to find, but someone recognizable, someone with a profile. That could be a junior minister, a prominent backbencher, someone who's been on television, someone people would actually recognize. The speculation must be absolutely rampant in Westminster right now, with Labour MPs looking at each other, wondering who the traitor is, who's been talking to Farage, who's about to jump ship. And here's why this is so much more significant than another Conservative defection. Reform has been successfully positioning itself as the natural home for disaffected Tories, people who think the Conservative Party has lost its way, abandoned its principles, become too centrist or managerialist, or whatever criticism you want to level at them. That's a coherent political narrative. Conservative voters and politicians moving to reform make sense within that framework. But a Labour defection, that's a completely different animal. That suggests reform is breaking out of being just a right-wing protest party and becoming something broader, something that can attract people from across the political spectrum who are disillusioned with the establishment. Or, alternatively, it suggests that there are Labour MPs so unhappy with Keir Starmer's government that they're willing to jump to a party that's politically quite distant from traditional Labour values. Either way, it's significant. Now, Farage has accumulated quite the collection of former Conservatives at this point. The list is genuinely impressive. Former Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi, Dame Andrea Jenkins, Jonathan Gullis, Nadine Dorries, and now Robert Jenrick. These aren't nobodies. These are people who held significant positions, who have name recognition, who bring experience and contacts and credibility. Zahawi was literally Chancellor of the Exchequer. Jenrick was a senior minister and shadow cabinet member. These are serious political figures, and they're all now Reform UK representatives. That's not just a few disgruntled backbenchers, that's wholesale transfer of talent and experience from one party to another.
That's the charitable interpretation. The less charitable interpretation is that students have learned to give the socially acceptable answer when asked about free speech in the abstract, but when faced with concrete situations involving people and parties they actually dislike, their commitment to that principle evaporates faster than water on a hot stove. Now, to be fair to universities, the government has been taking steps to address these issues. The Office for Students was handed more powers to examine complaints from speakers, students and staff regarding free speech infringements. In August of last year, new rules were unveiled binding universities to actively support academic freedom and ensure students can freely engage in discussions without fears over censorship. The regulations also scrapped non-disclosure agreements intended to silence campus misconduct victims, which is genuinely positive. If a university is accused of suppressing free speech, the Office for Students now has authority to investigate and take action. The University of Sussex was hit with a £585,000 fine over failure to uphold free speech just last year. So there are consequences now, real financial consequences, for universities that don't protect open debate. But here's the problem. You can mandate free speech from the top down. You can threaten fines and investigations. You can create all the policies and procedures you want. But if students themselves don't value free expression, if they genuinely believe that banning people they disagree with is acceptable or even virtuous, then no amount of regulatory oversight will fix the underlying cultural problem. This isn't about university administrators being too restrictive. This is about students themselves demanding restrictions. That's much harder to solve because you're fighting against attitudes and beliefs, not just institutional policies. Let's think about why this might be happening, because understanding the cause is essential to finding solutions. One factor is undoubtedly social media, which has created environments where people can curate their information diet to include only views they already agree with, where disagreement is often met with blocking or muting rather than engagement, where pile-ons and public shaming are used to enforce conformity.
Students raised in that environment might genuinely not understand the value of encountering challenging ideas because they've never had to seriously engage with them. Another factor is probably the increasing politicization of everything. When politics stops being about competing visions for society and starts being about good people versus evil people, it becomes much easier to justify silencing the evil people because you're not just disagreeing with them, you're protecting society from harm. That's a dangerous mindset because it treats political opponents as enemies to be defeated rather than citizens to be persuaded. There's also potentially an element of risk aversion. This generation of students has grown up being told that words can be violence, that certain ideas are literally dangerous, that exposure to the wrong viewpoints can cause psychological harm. If you genuinely believe that, then banning speakers isn't censorship, it's safeguarding, it's protecting vulnerable people from harm. The problem is that ideas, even offensive ones, aren't actually violence. They might be uncomfortable, they might be upsetting, they might challenge deeply held beliefs, but that's not the same as physical danger. We've conflated emotional discomfort with actual harm, and the result is a generation that thinks protection from discomfort is a right, rather than encountering challenging ideas being a necessary part of education and growth. But here's what really gets me about this survey, and it's the contradiction at its heart. These students are at university, supposedly the pinnacle of education, places where critical thinking is meant to be developed, where people learn to analyze arguments, evaluate evidence, and form independent judgments. And yet significant numbers of them don't trust themselves or their peers to hear certain political views without being corrupted or damaged by them. What does that say about their confidence in their own beliefs? If your worldview is so fragile that it cannot withstand exposure to Reform UK or Labour politicians giving a talk, maybe the problem isn't the speakers. Maybe it's that your beliefs haven't been tested and refined through genuine intellectual challenge. There's also something deeply patronizing about the attitude underlying these bans. It's essentially saying, I'm sophisticated enough to hear these ideas without being influenced by them, but other people aren't, so we need to protect them. That's not equality, that's elitism. That's assuming you have superior judgment, whilst everyone else is vulnerable to manipulation and needs you to decide what they can hear. Students should be treated as adults capable of making their own judgments about arguments they encounter, not children who need protecting from bad influences.